Christopher Langston was a billionaire whose empire stretched across industries, technology, real estate, and luxury automobiles. He lived in a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of the city, a fortress of marble and glass. To the world, he was a symbol of power, wealth, and control. But behind the glittering walls, Christopher carried a secret that gnawed at his pride and tested his heart every day. His only son, Michael, was schizophrenic. Michael was 17, tall and frail, with restless blue eyes that seemed to live in two worlds at once. Some days he laughed at voices only he could hear, pacing his room in endless circles. Other days he fell into silence, staring at walls as though the universe had abandoned him. Doctors, specialists, and therapists had been paraded in and out of the mansion at Christopher's expense, but nothing had truly changed his son's condition. Christopher loved his boy more than anything, yet he hated how powerless he felt. The world admired his wealth and applauded his genius, but when he looked into Michael's eyes, he saw something he couldn't buy: peace of mind. For years, Christopher kept Michael away from strangers. His pride refused to let the world know his heir was broken, as cruel whispers in his own mind sometimes called it. The mansion staff had orders: never speak about the boy, never let outsiders see him. He was a secret locked inside gilded walls. Then came Rosa. Rosa Williams was the new maid, a black woman in her late 20s who had come from the poorer side of town. She was soft-spoken, her voice carrying the rhythm of church hymns her grandmother had once sung. Christopher had barely noticed her when she was hired, just another name on the payroll. But she had noticed Michael. One quiet afternoon, Christopher walked down the east wing where his son's room was. The hallway was lined with portraits of Langston ancestors, each face proud and cold. As he drew closer, he expected to hear the usual, the erratic muttering, the restless pacing. But instead, there was silence. Alarmed, he pushed the door open. Inside, Michael sat on the floor near the window, his knees pulled to his chest. Beside him, Rosa knelt, her hands gently resting on his trembling shoulders. Her voice, calm and steady, filled the room. "You're safe, child," she whispered. "Those voices can't hurt you here. Breathe with me, in and out." To Christopher's shock, Michael was following her lead. His son's chest rose and fell in rhythm with hers. His hands, usually clenched and twitching, rested still against his knees. Christopher froze in the doorway. He had never seen Michael this calm without heavy medication. The boy's blue eyes were fixed on Rosa's, as if she were the anchor that kept him from drifting into madness. Rosa hummed softly, a tune that sounded like an old gospel lullaby. Michael's lips moved with hers, almost as if he remembered the melody. For a fleeting moment, he looked like any other teenager, vulnerable but at peace. Christopher's heart dropped. It wasn't just the sight of his son finding comfort. It was who gave it to him. A maid, a stranger, a black woman he had barely noticed. The billionaire's chest tightened with conflicting emotions. Pride told him this was unacceptable. How could his son, his heir, find solace in the arms of a servant? But another part of him, a part buried deep beneath years of pride and control, whispered something else: she's helping him in ways you never could. Michael. Christopher's voice broke the silence. The boy flinched, his eyes darting toward his father. The fragile calm wavered. Rosa looked up quickly, her dark eyes meeting Christopher's. For a moment, she seemed afraid she had crossed an invisible line. But she didn't let go of Michael. Instead, she gave Christopher a steady, respectful nod, as if silently asking permission to continue. Christopher's throat tightened. Words refused to form. All he could do was stand there, watching his broken son lean against a maid's shoulder, finding comfort in a place he had never thought to look. And for the first time in years, the billionaire felt powerless in a way that shook him to his core. Christopher hardly slept that night. He kept replaying the image in his mind: Michael resting against Rosa's shoulder, calm, still, even, normal. Normal. It was a word Christopher hadn't dared to dream about in years. Every therapist, every clinic, every cutting-edge treatment his billions could buy had promised improvement but delivered disappointment. And yet, one maid with no medical degree, no training beyond a broom and a mop, had managed what the world's top doctors could not. The billionaire's pride burned. At breakfast the next morning, he sat at the long dining table staring at untouched eggs and toast. His butler, Harrison, cleared his throat. "Sir, the new maid seems to have bonded with young Master Michael. Would you like me to," he hesitated, choosing his words carefully, "redirect her duties?" Christopher's jaw tightened. He didn't like the thought of his son needing anyone, least of all a servant. And yet, a strange fear gripped him. What if taking her away shattered whatever fragile calm she had created? Leave her be, Christopher muttered finally. For now. But he decided he would watch. That afternoon, he returned to Michael's wing, moving silently down the corridor. The boy's laughter reached his ears first, light, unguarded, nothing like the strained giggles Christopher had grown used to. He pushed the door slightly ajar and peered inside. Michael sat cross-legged on the carpet. Rosa was across from him, holding a deck of colorful cards. Now, she said gently, when the voices get loud, you pick a card. Read the word out loud. That word is stronger than the noise in your head. Understand? Michael nodded, his lips trembling with concentration. He picked up a card. Hope, he whispered. That's right, Rosa encouraged, clapping softly. Hope. Say it again. Hope. This time his voice was louder, steadier. Christopher felt something stir in his chest. He remembered when Michael was 5, giggling as he learned to read simple words with his mother before illness consumed his mind. His late wife, Evelyn, used to sit by Michael's bed and read him stories until his eyelids grew heavy. That tenderness had vanished from the house after she passed, replaced by nurses, routines, and medication schedules. And now Rosa was reviving it. The next few days only deepened Christopher's turmoil. Rosa was more than just a comfort, she was teaching Michael coping techniques. When the boy grew anxious, she guided him through breathing exercises. When paranoia crept in, she handed him cards with affirming words, strength, peace, love. She never rushed him, never scolded him. She listened. Christopher began timing his visits so he could quietly observe. At first, he justified it as vigilance, ensuring the maid wasn't overstepping. But deep down, he was drawn to the sight of his son healing, however slowly. One evening, Christopher lingered outside the door longer than usual. He heard Rosa humming again, the same lullaby he'd first caught. Michael's voice broke in, small but clear. Miss Rosa, why are you helping me? Christopher's chest clenched. He pressed closer to the door, his breath shallow. Rosa's answer came after a pause, her tone soft but certain. Because when I look at you, I don't see an illness. I see a boy who wants to be free from fear. And I know what fear feels like, Michael. I grew up with it too. Michael tilted his head. Voices. Not voices, she said with a sad smile he couldn't see, but people. People telling me I'd never be good enough. That because of my skin, my family, my poverty, I would always be less. But I learned something, those voices only have power if you listen. The real strength comes from choosing your own voice. There was silence, then a quiet sniffle. Christopher realized with shock, it wasn't Rosa who was crying. It was Michael. His son leaned forward, resting his forehead against Rosa's shoulder. I want to listen to my own voice too. Rosa held him gently, rocking slightly. And you will. Every day we'll practice until your voice is louder than all the others. Something broke inside Christopher in that moment. His carefully built wall of pride, the belief that only wealth and status mattered, crumbled under the weight of a maid's compassion. He felt both ashamed and grateful. Ashamed that he, a father, had failed to reach his son like this. Grateful that someone else finally had. When Rosa left the room later that night, she was startled to see Christopher standing in the hall. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, fear flashed across her face, as if she expected to be scolded or dismissed. But Christopher only said one thing, his voice low and rough. Thank you. Her lips parted in surprise, but before she could reply, he turned and walked away, his heart heavy with questions he wasn't ready to face. Christopher's world began to change in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. The mansion, once silent and heavy with loneliness, now carried faint echoes of laughter. The East Wing, which had felt like a prison, now smelled of crayons, cards, and fresh air because Rosa often opened the windows for Michael. But change did not come without resistance. At a board meeting, Christopher's business partners spoke of mergers and expansions. Yet Christopher's mind wandered, replaying Rosa's words, the real strength comes from choosing your own voice. When one of the directors nudged him for an opinion, Christopher startled as though pulled from another world. For the first time in decades, the affairs of billions felt secondary. That evening, Harrison the butler approached him cautiously. Sir, if I may, the staff has noticed your son's improvement under Miss Williams's care. But some are whispering. They say it is unorthodox for a maid to take such liberties. Christopher stared at the butler, his face unreadable. Whisperers don't heal my son, he said coldly. She does. Harrison bowed and left, but Christopher's words echoed in his own ears. They felt strange, even rebellious, as though he was betraying the rigid order he had built his empire upon. The true test came one stormy night. Thunder shook the mansion, rattling the windows. Michael spiraled into panic, convinced monsters hid in the shadows. He screamed until his voice cracked, clawing at the walls. Christopher rushed to his room, desperate, but his presence only seemed to worsen the boy's terror. Then Rosa appeared, her uniform damp from rushing through the rain-soaked courtyard where she had been hanging linens. She knelt beside Michael, ignoring Christopher's commanding presence. Her voice was steady, her arms firm but tender as she pulled Michael close. It's only thunder, child, she whispered, pressing his trembling hands to her chest. Do you feel that? My heart is still beating. Strong. Yours is too. The monsters can't touch us here. Slowly, Michael's ragged breath steadied. His cries softened into hiccups. His small hands clutched her shirt as though she were his anchor in the storm. Christopher stood frozen, watching the scene through blurred eyes. For years, he had thought money could build walls strong enough to shield his son. But in that moment, he realized it wasn't walls Michael needed, it was warmth. Humanity. A heart willing to sit in the storm with him. When Michael finally fell asleep, Rosa gently laid him in bed and pulled the blanket over his shoulders. Only then did she turn toward Christopher, uncertain of how he would react. To her shock, the billionaire's eyes glistened. His lips trembled as he whispered, I couldn't help him. Rosa stepped closer, her voice calm but firm. You are his father. He doesn't need you to fix him. He needs you to love him, loudly, unashamedly, even when he's broken. Especially then. Christopher swallowed hard. The weight of years of pride and fear pressed against him, but Rosa's words carved a crack in his armor. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine being more than a provider, more than a billionaire, just a father. The days that followed marked a quiet transformation. Christopher began spending more time in Michael's room, not as an observer, but as a participant. He learned the breathing exercises, repeating them clumsily until Michael giggled at his mistakes. He read cards with words like hope and strength alongside his son. He even tried humming Rose's lullaby, though his voice was off-key. And slowly, Michael began to lean on him too. One afternoon, as Christopher prepared to leave for an important meeting, Michael tugged at his sleeve. Dad, stay. The request was simple, yet it shattered Christopher's carefully constructed priorities. For once, he canceled the meeting. They sat together on the carpet, building a puzzle. Rosa watched from the doorway, her lips curving into a quiet smile. Months later, whispers spread outside the mansion. The media learned of the billionaire's reclusive son, of the maid who had become his unlikely companion. Some critics mocked Christopher for allowing a servant into his private world. Others praised the humanity behind the headlines. But Christopher no longer cared what the world thought. His empire could rise or fall, it meant little compared to the sound of his son's laughter. One evening, as the sun painted the sky gold, Christopher stood on the balcony overlooking his vast estate. Rosa approached, hesitant. Sir, she said softly, I've been meaning to ask, do you want me to step back now? Now that you and Michael are finding your rhythm? Christopher turned, his expression firm yet gentle. No, Rosa, you are part of this family now. You showed my son, and me, that love is stronger than fear. I won't let pride take that away. For the first time in years, Christopher felt something he had nearly forgotten. Peace. And it wasn't wealth, power, or prestige that gave it to him. It was a maid's compassion, a son's laughter, and a father's newfound courage to love without conditions.